You're watching a live interview. A list actor on the couch. The host, smiling, lobs a soft, predictable question, and then it happens. The star, bored or arrogant or just having a bad day, decides to punch down. They dismiss the question. They mock the host's intelligence. They try to seize control of the interview, turning the host into a prop in their own personal show. The studio audience titters nervously. The moment hangs in the balance, threatening to spiral into an awkward, cringe-worthy disaster. But then, the host doesn't flinch. They don't get flustered. Instead, they offer a slight, knowing smile, and with a single, perfectly calibrated sentence. A sentence that is neither rude nor weak, but razor-sharp and intellectually superior. They reclaim the stage, expose the celebrity's bluster, and etch the moment into television history. That, right there, is the art of the comeback. It's not about being the loudest or the meanest. It's about being the smartest, the quickest, and the most unshakable under fire. It's a rare and powerful skill that separates the teleprompter readers from the true masters of the interview format. We all remember the celebrity meltdowns and the shocking confessions, but what about the interviewers who, through sheer wit and poise, managed to turn an ambush into a triumph? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on these verbal ninjas. We're diving into the stories of the hosts who looked power, fame and outright hostility in the eye and didn't just survive. They won. Because in the high-stakes world of live television, the greatest power isn't asking the tough question, it's knowing exactly what to say when the answer is meant to destroy you. Before we begin our countdown, do you have a favorite comeback moment from an interviewer? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you're fascinated by the hidden power dynamics of Hollywood, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The architect of the polite guillotine, Sir David Frost. To understand the art of the comeback, one must first understand that it is not always about speed. Sometimes, the most devastating counter punch is a slow, deliberate, and impeccably polite one. No one exemplified this better than the legendary Sir David Frost. While many remember him for his monumental interviews with disgraced President Richard Nixon, his mastery was perhaps even more perfectly displayed in a 1979 encounter with the notoriously difficult and brilliant Orson Welles. The setting was the David Frost Show. Welles, the cinematic genius behind Citizen Kane, was a formidable intellectual and a known bully in interviews. He enjoyed belittling his hosts, turning their questions into fodder for his own condescending wit. He saw interviewers not as colleagues but as subordinates. The interview began with Welles holding court, dismissing Frost's questions with a wave of his cigar, pontificating in his sonorous, theatrical voice. He was the maestro and Frost was his audience. Then Frost ventured into a delicate area, the concept of the well-rounded man. He suggested that Welles, for all his talents, might be an example of one. Welles seized the opportunity to launch his attack. With a patronizing smile, he leaned back and declared, "I think your question is what we call in the world of professional journalism a softball. It's not a very good question, David. It's a bit fluffy." The air went out of the room. Welles had publicly declared the host's intellect insufficient. A lesser interviewer might have apologized or become defensive. Frost did neither. He didn't even change his expression. He simply waited a beat, allowing Welles's insult to hang in the air, letting the audience fully absorb the condescension. Then, with a calm, almost gentle smile, Frost replied, "Orson, you may be right. But you see, I find that sometimes the softest balls are the hardest to hit well. They require a different kind of skill. Perhaps even a kind of finesse that brute force can't manage." The comeback was a masterpiece. It was not an insult, it was a reframing. In a single sentence, Frost transformed Welles's brute force intellectualism into a cruder, less sophisticated tool. He positioned his own soft question as a more nuanced, challenging endeavor. He didn't call Welles a bully, he merely suggested that his methods were unrefined. Welles was visibly taken aback. The smirk vanished from his face. He had expected a flinch and was met with a parry and a thrust. He stammered for a moment before conceding, "Well, that's a rather good point, actually." The power dynamic had instantly and permanently shifted. Frost had used Welles's own weapon, intellect, against him, but had done so with a elegance that left his guest disarmed, not destroyed. This was the polite guillotine. The blade was sharp, but the execution was so graceful the victim almost thanked him for it. The queen of the unblinking stare, Barbara Walters. If David Frost was the architect of the polite guillotine, Barbara Walters was the master of psychological jiu-jitsu. Her power didn't come from witty retorts, but from an unnerving, relentless stillness. She could weaponize silence in a single, perfectly timed follow-up question like no one else. Her comeback wasn't a verbal flourish, it was a surgical strike to the ego, delivered with a sympathetic tilt of the head. A prime example of this was her 1999 interview with action star Jean-Claude Van Damme. At the height of his fame, Van Damme was known for a larger-than-life, and often arrogant, persona. He sat down with Walters, clearly expecting a fawning tribute to his physique and box-office draw. Walters, however, had other plans. She gently guided the conversation toward his personal life and his reputation for being difficult. Van Damme, feeling cornered, decided to go on the offensive. He leaned forward, pointing a finger, and said with a condescending sneer, "Barbara, you are a very good journalist. But you are a woman. You cannot understand the mind of a man like me. The pressure, the animal inside. It is a man's world. It was a blatantly sexist and dismissive comment, designed to end the line of questioning by invalidating the questioner herself. The studio crew froze. This was a direct, personal attack on Walters's professional capability based on her gender. Barbara Walters did not get angry. She didn't even blink. She simply held his gaze, her expression one of mild, clinical curiosity. She let the silence stretch out for what felt like an eternity, allowing the ugliness of his comment to fully settle over the audience. Van Damme's smug confidence began to waver under her unwavering stare. Finally, in a quiet, measured tone, she asked, "Jean-Claude, if I cannot understand you because I'm a woman, then how can the millions of women who go to your films, who make you a star, possibly understand you either?" It was a checkmate in a single move. She hadn't risen to his bait. She hadn't called him a sexist. She had simply taken his own flawed logic and turned it back on him with devastating effect. She exposed the absurdity of his statement by pointing out that it invalidated his own fanbase. Van Damme was left speechless, his mouth agape. He had tried to push her off her game, and in response, she had calmly dismantled his entire premise. Walters proved that the most powerful comeback sometimes isn't a retort at all. It's a question that holds up a mirror, forcing the aggressor to confront the foolishness of their own words. The professor of the pointed parry, Dick Cavett. In the golden age of talk shows, Dick Cavett stood out as the intellectual's host. His show was a salon, a place for nuanced conversation with artists, writers, and thinkers. But this cerebral atmosphere could also attract volatile guests who mistook his erudition for weakness. One such guest was the legendary and famously combative novelist Norman Mailer. The year was 1971. Mailer was on the show alongside Gore Vidal, and the atmosphere was tense from the start. Mailer, who had been drinking, was in a belligerent mood. He began insulting Vidal, but then turned his fire on Cavett himself. He mocked Cavett's intelligence, his interviewing style, and his stature, calling him a dandy, and implying he wasn't a real man capable of understanding Mailer's raw, masculine genius. The audience was growing restless and Vidal was looking on with amusement. Mailer was attempting to hijack the entire program, reducing it to a platform for his own bombast. Cavett, a man of slight physical build, could have been physically and verbally overwhelmed. Instead, he waited for a pause in Mailer's tirade. He adjusted his glasses, leaned forward, and in his crisp, academic tone, said, "Norman, when you're done measuring the furniture, perhaps we could return to a discussion of ideas. I know it's less tangible, but some of us find it more interesting." The line was a thunderclap of wit. It dismissed Mailer's physical and verbal posturing as juvenile and irrelevant. It reframed the conflict not as a battle of egos, but as a choice between brute aggression and intelligent discourse. By referring to measuring the furniture, Cavett cleverly alluded to Mailer's focus on physicality and dominance, contrasting it with the discussion of ideas that Cavett represented. The audience erupted in applause and laughter. They were applauding not just the wit but the reclamation of intellectual territory. Mailer was left sputtering, his bluster deflated. He had tried to turn the interview into a street fight, and Cavett had calmly reminded everyone that they were in a university seminar. Cavett's comeback demonstrated that a superior intellect could disarm brute force by simply refusing to play by its rules. He was the professor who, with a single, arched eyebrow and a polysyllabic "put down," could silence the classroom bully. The modern master of deflective grace, Anderson Cooper. In today's media landscape, where gotcha moments and viral outrage are currency, the art of the comeback has evolved. It's less about the witty insult and more about maintaining control and dignity in the face of absurdity or bad faith. No one currently working exemplifies this better than Anderson Cooper. His power is his preternatural calm, a demeanor so unflappable it can absorb any amount of heat without ever catching fire. A stunning example of this occurred during a 2022 CNN town hall with a controversial political figure known for spreading misinformation. The individual, growing agitated by Cooper's fact-based follow-ups, decided to launch a personal attack. "Anderson," he said with a sneer, "you sit there in your pristine suit with your fancy Yale education, looking down on all of us regular Americans from your ivory tower. You have no idea what our lives are like." It was a classic populist attack designed to paint Cooper as an out-of-touch elitist and put him on the defensive. The goal was to derail the substantive discussion and turn it into a debate about Cooper's persona. Cooper didn't take the bait. He didn't list his journalistic credentials or try to prove his regular guy bona fides. He simply nodded slowly as if considering the feedback. Then, he said in his characteristically flat, calm tone, "I appreciate you sharing that perspective. But whether you like my suit or not, the question remains about the data. The data, which we have right here on screen, shows that what you just said is factually incorrect. So, let's return to that." It was a breathtaking display of emotional discipline. He acknowledged the attack without validating it. By saying, "I appreciate you sharing that perspective," he neutered its venom, treating it as an opinion rather than a truth. Then, with surgical precision, he pivoted directly back to the substance. The data. He refused to be dragged into the identity politics mud pit. He reminded the audience and his guest that the foundation of the conversation was not personal feelings but verifiable facts. In doing so, he made his aggressor look small and evasive. The attempt to bully had failed because the target refused to be bullied. Cooper's comeback was a masterclass in modern media jiu-jitsu. using an opponent's aggressive energy to reaffirm your own core principles of clarity, fact, and civility. The art of the comeback. More than a zinger, what separates these masters from the countless hosts who have been steamrolled by a difficult celebrity? It's a combination of key traits, deep preparation. They aren't just reading index cards. Frost knew Welles's history inside and out. Walters understood Van Damme's public persona. Cavett was intellectually equipped to spar with Mailer. Cooper studies the data. This knowledge gives them the confidence to stand their ground. Emotional control. The single greatest weapon a hostile guest has is the ability to provoke an emotional reaction. Fury, fluster, fear. All of these lead to a loss of control. Frost's calm, Walters's stare, Cavett's academic detachment, and Cooper's preternatural stillness are all forms of emotional armor. They deny the aggressor the satisfaction of a reaction. Audience awareness. A great comeback isn't just for the guest, it's for the audience. These interviewers understand that the audience is the jury. They craft their responses not just to shut down the guest, but to win the sympathy and respect of those watching. They frame themselves as the guardian of the conversation's integrity. The principle of reframing. The core of a great comeback is almost never a direct insult, it is the act of reframing the conflict. Frost reframed a soft question as a test of finesse. Walters reframed a sexist remark as an insult to the guest's own fans. Cavett reframed a physical threat as an intellectual deficit. Cooper reframed a personal attack as an irrelevant distraction from the facts. The art of the comeback, then, is the ultimate demonstration of control in a medium designed to spiral into chaos. It is the moment a host proves they are not just a facilitator, but a force in their own right. They are the guardians at the gate of public discourse, and when a celebrity tries to storm that gate with bluster, ego, or hostility, these masters are the ones who, with a quiet word or a steely gaze, remind them who is really in charge. So the next time you see an interviewer face a difficult guest, watch closely. You're not just watching a conversation. You're watching a high-wire act, a psychological duel. And when the host, against all odds, delivers that perfect, poised, and powerful comeback, you are witnessing a rare and beautiful form of artistry. The art of never, ever letting them see you sweat. Who do you think is the greatest master of the interview comeback of all time? Was it Frost's elegance, Walter's stillness, Cavett's wit, or Cooper's calm? Or is there another moment that stands out in your mind? The debate is part of what makes this art form so fascinating. Let me know your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the secrets of television history.